ash begins to fall from a clear blue sky. At first, it looks almost like snow. Then small stones begin striking the roofs. Pompeii still had time. No one knew how much. This is the story of Pompeii. It was not a city with no chance to survive. It was a city that still had close to 18 hours before the deadliest cloud crossed its walls. Though no one inside could know that number in advance. In the year 79, Pompeii was not a ruin. It was alive. About 12,000 people lived inside its walls. Thousands more lived on farms and villas nearby. It was a busy Roman town, built for both work and pleasure. Wealthy families came here to escape the summer heat of Rome. The streets were lined with bakeries, wine shops, and small food counters where workers grabbed a quick meal. Painted walls showed gods, gardens, and scenes from daily life. The city was also genuinely wealthy, not just pleasant. Workshops here produced garum, a strong fish sauce loved across the Roman world, and shipped it out by the jarful. Even Pliny the Elder, writing about nature and trade, once praised Pompeii's garum as some of the finest made anywhere. There were grand houses with private gardens and narrow homes packed close together. Slaves, shopkeepers, and rich merchants all shared the same streets, even if their lives looked very different. Public baths were full every afternoon. People gathered there not just to wash, but to talk, argue, and share the local gossip. Pompeii's people were also deeply proud of their city. 20 years earlier, a gladiator show had turned into a violent brawl between local fans and visitors from a rival town. So many people were hurt that Rome banned Pompeii from holding any more games there for a full decade. On election walls, painted messages still urged citizens to vote for local candidates, as if the next city council still mattered more than anything else. People also scratched their own words directly into the plaster walls. Love notes, insults, tavern bills, even simple jokes. Hundreds of small, ordinary voices, never meant to last 2,000 years. Above the town stood a green mountain. Its slopes were covered in vineyards, heavy with grapes. People called it Vesuvius. Almost nobody feared it. No one alive had ever seen it erupt. To them, it was just a mountain. Old, quiet, and useful for growing wine. But 17 years earlier, in the year 62, the ground had already sent a warning. A powerful earthquake shook the whole region. Buildings cracked. Statues fell. Around 600 sheep dropped dead from the shock, according to the writer Seneca. Pompeii spent years rebuilding after that earthquake. By the year 79, much of the city still looked like a construction site. Wooden frames for repairs still stood in the forum. Work was not yet finished. Small tremors kept coming, on and off, for years after. People had grown used to them. They had stopped listening. This is often how disaster works. The warning comes early, but by the time anyone understands it, it no longer feels like a warning. It just feels like ordinary life. On an ordinary afternoon, the mountain finally broke its silence. It It began with a deep, rolling boom, loud enough to be heard for miles around the bay. Shopkeepers stepped outside to look. Children stopped playing in the street. A column of smoke and ash shot into the sky. Within minutes, it rose higher than any building humans had ever built. One witness later compared its shape to a tall pine tree, spreading wide at the very top. That witness was a 17-year-old boy named Pliny, staying across the bay in the naval town of Misenum with his mother and his uncle. His uncle, also named Pliny, was a Roman admiral and a curious man who spent his life studying and writing about the natural world. When the strange cloud appeared, the older Pliny ordered a small boat, planning simply to sail closer and observe it. Then a messenger arrived with a letter. It was from Rectina, a friend whose villa stood right beneath the mountain. She was trapped. The only way out was by sea, and she begged Pliny to come and rescue her. His journey changed in that single moment. He was no longer sailing toward Vesuvius out of curiosity. He was sailing toward it to save lives. He ordered his fastest warships to launch at once, then boarded one himself, sailing straight into the falling ash. His young nephew stayed behind at Misenum with his mother, finishing a writing exercise his uncle had set for him. Meanwhile, in Pompeii, the sky had turned the color of iron. Pumice stones the size of a fist began raining down on the streets. Roads filled with broken stone and ash. Roofs groaned under the growing weight. Some families packed quickly and left through the northern gate, walking away from the mountain while the road was still open. Others stayed. They believed their homes were still safe, or they simply refused to leave their belongings behind. Leaving was not equally easy for everyone. A free citizen with a healthy body and a cart could decide to go within minutes. An elderly grandparent, someone recovering from illness, or an enslaved person given no choice in the matter, faced a much harder path. If they had a real path at all. Just a few miles away, on the other side of the mountain, the town of Herculaneum was living through a very different afternoon. The wind was carrying the ash toward Pompeii, not toward them. For hours, Herculaneum's streets stayed almost clear. Some residents felt calm enough to wait and watch, sure that the worst had already passed them by. They had more time than they believed they needed. By nightfall, the pumice was falling faster than before. In some streets of Pompeii, it piled almost 3 meters deep, burying doorways and blocking every narrow lane. Roofs that had survived the earthquake 17 years earlier now began to give way under this new weight. Across the bay in Misenum, the ground shook harder than ever before. Even as it shook, the young Pliny kept reading his book and taking notes. An act he later admitted might have been courage or simple foolishness. The sea pulled strangely backward, leaving fish stranded on wet sand that had never been dry. People ran outside, tying pillows to their heads with cloth, hoping for some protection from the falling stones. The young Pliny and his mother joined the crowd fleeing the town. She begged him to leave her behind and save himself, saying an old woman would die happy, knowing she had not slowed him down. He refused, took her hand, and made her walk faster instead. Meanwhile, on the beach at Stabiae, the elder Pliny finally reached his friend Pomponianus. Strong wind and rough waves made it impossible to sail back out to sea. Ash kept falling around them, thick and constant. Pliny told everyone to stay calm. He rested and ate dinner while the disaster continued outside, hoping calm thinking might still save them. He waited for the wind to change. It never did. Vesuvius was not finished. It had only been resting, preparing for something far worse than falling stone. In the middle of the night, the volcano changed its attack completely. The ash column, so high and so heavy, finally began to collapse under its own weight. It came down not as falling stone, but as a wall of scorching gas and ash, racing down the mountainside at terrifying speed. Around 1 a.m, the first of these burning clouds reached Herculaneum. Hundreds of people had gathered at the shore there, sheltering in stone boat chambers, still waiting for ships that were never going to arrive in time. The cloud reached them within seconds. There was no warning left to give. Pompeii still had several hours left, but it did not know what had just happened on the other side of the mountain. More clouds followed, each one reaching a little farther than the last. At about 7 a.m, one of them finally crossed Pompeii's walls. This was the moment the story of time ended. The heat reached hundreds of degrees, and it arrived in seconds, not minutes. Centuries later, archaeologists found the shapes of the dead exactly as death had caught them. People were found crouched close together. Some had covered their faces. Others still carried keys, lamps, jewelry, or coins. Their bodies slowly disappeared over time, leaving hollow spaces inside the hardened ash. In 1863, an archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli realized what these empty spaces really were. He poured liquid plaster into these spaces. He let it harden, then carefully removed the ash around it. What remained was the exact final shape of a person who died almost 2,000 years earlier. On the beach at Stabiae, the elder Pliny tried to stand and walk toward the ships one more time. He collapsed onto the sand. His companions could not revive him. 2 days later, they found his body. And his nephew later wrote that he looked simply asleep, not harmed at all. Historians still debate exactly what killed him: toxic gas from the eruption, or a sudden failure of an already tired heart. Either way, the mountain he had sailed toward, out of both duty and curiosity, became the place where his life ended. Across the bay, his nephew survived. The young Pliny and his mother had walked far enough, fast enough, away from the coast. They lived to see the ash finally settle. They had time, but they did not know how little. By the next afternoon, Pompeii was gone. Not destroyed slowly, but buried, sealed under many meters of ash and stone. Roofs, streets, gardens, and the final hours of thousands of ordinary lives. All of it vanished beneath a gray, silent blanket. Herculaneum vanished too, buried under a different kind of material that hardened almost like stone. Strangely, this sealed the town so tightly that even wooden furniture and papyrus scrolls survived inside it, protected from air and fire for 2,000 years. For over 1,500 years, the city was forgotten. Its name faded from memory, buried as deeply as its own streets. In 1748, workers digging near Naples struck old walls by accident. Slowly, Pompeii began to rise again. Not as a living town, but as a frozen photograph of a single day in Roman history. We know so much about that day for one specific reason. Nearly 30 years later, the surviving nephew, now a grown man, wrote 2 long letters to the historian Tacitus. In them, he described his uncle's final voyage and his own escape with his mother. Without those letters, most of this story would have stayed buried along with the city. For centuries, historians repeated the same date for that day, August the 24th. But in 2018, archaeologists found something small and easy to miss. A short message written in charcoal on a wall, dated to a day in October. Charcoal writing does not survive rain and weather for very long. If it was still visible when the ash fell, the eruption likely did not happen in August at all. Other clues quietly supported this. Pomegranates and walnuts were found preserved among the ruins. These are foods of autumn, not summer. Some victims wore heavier clothing more fitting for October. One coin could not have been made before September of that year. Many archaeologists now believe the eruption happened in autumn, possibly on October the 24th, though the exact date is still debated. It feels like a fitting final twist for Pompeii. Even after standing frozen for centuries, the city is still revealing new truths about itself. And perhaps the deepest truth Pompeii offers has little to do with volcanoes at all. Most of Pompeii's people appear to have escaped before the final clouds arrived. Those who remained were not simply foolish. Some waited for family. Some tried to protect their homes. Some were old, sick, enslaved, or unable to move quickly. Others may have believed that the worst had already passed. A disaster rarely gives people perfect information. It gives them noise, confusion, blocked streets, frightened voices, and choices that only look obvious afterward. Today, nearly 3 million people live in the region around Vesuvius, in and around the city of Naples. Modern emergency planners still study Pompeii and Herculaneum closely, not simply as ancient history, but as a lasting warning about how easily ordinary life can hide a closing window of time. Pompeii still had time, but no one knew how little. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson it still has to teach. A warning is hardest to hear when it still sounds like ordinary life. Pompeii teaches us something simple, and something we still forget today. Warnings rarely arrive as loud sirens. Usually, they arrive quietly, and it is up to us to listen. If this story moved you, subscribe to EraSpeak for more true stories from history, told simply, so you can learn English while you learn the world.